killing Khalistani terrorists? Yes or no? We're not sure. Do you think the US is behind this?
That's a great question. This Niger and Pannu and all, these are terrorists, okay? We think of them as Khalistani terrorists. They're not Khalistani terrorists. Niger was a Canadian terrorist. He had Canadian citizenship. And this Pannu fellow is an American terrorist. That's why the US would like Mr. Modi to not stay in power and some weaker coalition government to come to power, which can be easily influenced.
If the allegations are true, what does India really have up its sleeve to go up and directly attack Canada diplomatically and then stand in the face of the world without flinching?
The Five Eyes is an intelligence sharing network which is composed of 5 nations: the US, Canada, the UK, Australia and New Zealand. The 5 English speaking nations. These nations are spokes and the US is the hub.
Why does India not have any vassal states?
We have no ambitions of being a great nation.
Do you think that there could be potentially civil wars as the Prime Minister's term comes to an end? Abhijit, welcome to Dostcast once again.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure to have you and discuss what is happening in the world. Last time we discussed Sheikh Hasina and her unfortunate exit to India. We will discuss that a little as well. लेकिन अभी इस वक्त दुनिया भर में there is big talk about Canada and India not being friends anymore diplomatically.
Yes.
We've pulled out diplomats, they pulled out diplomats. Last time you mentioned that Canada has always been a vassal state of the USA. Mm-hmm. My first suspicion is that Canada pounding down heavy on India, talking about unsubstantiated claims around India killing Khalistani terrorists. Yes or no? We're not sure. Do you think the US is behind this?
That's a great question. So there's a lot that's happened in the past few days. India has expelled Canadian diplomats. And India has withdrawn its diplomats, 6 of our diplomats. So essentially, it's like ties are over between India and Canada. Diplomatic relations are almost over. You have probably a skeleton staff in both embassies, on both sides. And Trudeau has been making these allegations. Now, last night, he made a deposition against in front of the Canadian Parliamentary Committee or whatever it was, in which he was asked questions about the allegations he has made. And he said on record that he doesn't have any proof, any evidentiary proof.
He said he only has intelligence.
Intelligence, but no proof, no evidence, right? Nothing he can put on the record and demonstrate that this happened. So he's making up stories. He's concocting stories. That's what's happening, first of all. So first of all, we haven't pulled out, the Canadians haven't pulled out their diplomats. We have expelled those diplomats. And then they claim that they expelled Indian diplomats, but the fact is that we had already pulled out our diplomats.
Right.
So that's what's going on. And you will see that the entire Canadian leadership, whether it's Trudeau, whether it is Melanie Joly or whoever else, is making statement after statement about this, while the Indian leadership isn't addressing the issue at all. There's no statement coming from the Prime Minister, the Foreign
Minister.
Just the
MEA, by the way.
Just the MEA. The bureaucrats are putting out press releases. That's the situation. Now, the question you asked is very pertinent. Is the US behind this entire matter? Well, we have zero evidence that will link the US to this, but what you will see is that the Canadians have been putting out press releases, etc., in which they are reaching out to the UK, for example. Keir Starmer is the UK's new temporary Prime Minister, and his government has come out in strong support of Canada. New Zealand has come out in support of Canada. So there's something called the Five Eyes, the Five Eyes Coalition, which is owned by the US.
That's why it's popular on Twitter. I never understood what the Five Eyes is.
So the Five Eyes is an intelligence sharing network, which is composed of 5 nations: the US, Canada, the UK, Australia and New Zealand. The 5 English-speaking nations, the Anglosphere, the big daddy is obviously the US, and all the other nations are more or less, you could say, vassals of the US. Australia is like a US corporation. Canada is geopolitically insignificant without US protection. The UK and so on and so forth. So it's entirely owned by the US, and the US has the biggest military intelligence operation in the world. And these nations are hubs, you could say, are spokes, and the US is the hub. So now, if the US is behind this, how would it serve them is the question, right? So things haven't been good between India and the US since around 2020 when Mr. Trump went out of power and Mr. Biden or whoever is running the government came to power. And since then, the relationship has been kind of on a downward slope between India and the US. And the Americans have been putting a lot of pressure on India for a variety of matters. There is a lot of pressure put on India from the media, not just the English speaking media and the English media in the US, but also all across the world. The UK, for example, even the German media, French media kind of attack India. Even the Japanese media attacks India. You see this all over the place.
What is the famous article in their publication called Nikkei? Where they said strange foreign policy has left India friendless in Southeast Asia.
In Southeast Asia and all that. Yeah. So you see this coming from all over the place. There are think tanks that put out opinion pieces and articles and reports that malign India. You have all these surveys, etc., that say that India's democracy is backsliding and India's religious freedom has problems and all. So you see this all-round attack coming on India since around 2020. It's been there before that as well. And things have... you've seen a drastic uptick in this since February 22 when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, the special military operation, and India refused to take the side of the West. India chose to be neutral. So you've seen much more of that coming in since 22, and it all peaked in early 24 when there was the election in India, the general elections, in which Prime Minister Modi did not get a full mandate, 240 or so seats, and some of that could have been because of foreign interference, 100%, because they have been supporting various influencers, YouTubers, media outlets and whatnot in India through a variety of means, NGOs, whatnot, to create a certain narrative on the ground. So they succeeded in ensuring that Mr. Modi doesn't get a full mandate. That you could say some of it was because of them. So, what's the objective? What objective does the US have? They see Mr. Modi as a problematic person. They would like a more pliable regime in India, more pliable government in India, which would be more amenable to doing things at the US's behest. And Mr. Modi obviously has certain red lines that nobody can cross, and that's why this problem. So they would want a regime change in India eventually. And to do that, they use a lot of different methods.
I have a question.
To apply pressure. Yeah.
Last time you mentioned that India is a soft power and India has its own problems. It requires serious military strength if it were to compete with some of the best in the world and stand off. You said we're the only sovereign, and France is technically half a sovereign, something like that.
Yes, I did say that.
Yeah, so my question then is, what does India have up its sleeve that, if the allegations are true, I would highly like them to be true, because why would you not kill the enemies of India, right? Why does India have to always play pacifier in foreign policy? Why can't India be an aggressor when it comes to its own enemies? If the allegations are true, what does India really have up its sleeve to go up and directly attack Canada diplomatically and then stand in the face of the world with this without flinching? Look,
when it comes to Canada is a lightweight nation. It's geopolitically insignificant. It has no hard power of its own.
Kya baat kar rahe ho? It shares it's so close to Russia. How is that insignificant?
Geopolitically insignificant. Geographically significant.
Okay.
Geopolitically, as a hard power, it is nothing. Okay, it has no diplomatic heft of any kind. It has no standing army that can go and invade a nation or scare somebody. It has no nuclear weapons. It has nothing. It exists as an entity because of the protection and benevolent whatever the US gives it. So geopolitically, Canada is insignificant. Now, India has essentially nuked its relationship with Canada because of what Canada has been doing. So there's nothing more we can do beyond this vis-a-vis Canada, short of completely cutting down diplomatic relations and imposing sanctions on Canada. Economic sanctions. But what we have done by doing this, what we have achieved by taking these steps, very, very drastic steps we have taken, is we have sent a message to the US that you tried to pressurize us using Canada, it's not worked. Now what are you going to do? What you going to do after this? And the US can do a whole lot of stuff against us. Okay, the US, so the question you asked, coming back to it, is what heft do we have? What leverage do we have? Vis-a-vis Canada, it doesn't matter. Vis-a-vis the US, which is the real power, is what matters. Look, they want to sell us drones. Okay, it's a multi-billion-dollar deal. And so we could perhaps dilly-dally a little bit on that, but we can't do much beyond that. We need jet engines from them to power our Tejas fighters. And that is the leverage is entirely with the US, not with us. So vis-a-vis the US, we don't have a tremendous amount of leverage. We don't have a lot of leverage at all. When it comes to a nation like the US, what can a nation like India do? So the US doesn't want to be seen as a nation that's trying to bully India. So they use all these different tactics. They use the UK, they use Canada, and so on. And what you see right now is that India may be going ahead with this drone deal. India may also be considering allowing Starlink to operate in India.
I saw your tweet today, yes.
Yes. So all these pressure tactics may be to achieve certain objectives like these. So if Starlink is allowed to operate in India, if it can beam internet from the satellites into India, then imagine what can happen. There's a riot somewhere, for example.
Recently, I looked up satellite phone because I was like, why don't I just get a satellite phone and I can just call whoever I want? I was thinking about privacy and like numbers and all of that. And I looked up the laws. It said satellite phones are banned in India.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because you can bypass government blocks.
Okay.
Okay, let's say there's a riot in an area and the government has shut down all telecommunications area, internet, phone connectivity,
which is something
phones.
they do whenever there are
You need to
riots,
do it. Yeah. So once in a while, if something like this happens, you need to do a temporary block in that area. But if you have a satellite phone, you can bypass that entirely because you're gonna be connected straight to the satellite. Go to any open area, go to the terrace of a building, balcony or whatever, and you'll be able to communicate with whoever you want in the world. So that's why satellite phones are dangerous. Now Starlink does exactly that. Okay, so for Starlink, you need a receiver which you have to buy from Starlink, and that will allow you to connect with the satellites, and you will get internet straight from the satellites. Of course, you will need some downlink stations in India, which will augment the speed and the effectiveness of the signal. But even without those local downlink stations in India, you can still connect to the internet straight from satellite, and you may get a decent speed, 1 to 5 Mbps or something. So if Starlink starts operating in India and people have receivers, then it's going to be a problem because, see, this has happened. Elon Musk has been operating Starlink in Ukraine, for example, but he has not allowed Russia to have that. And that gives the Ukrainians and the West a direct advantage vis-a-vis Russia. So wherever you are, if you're a Ukrainian soldier, doesn't matter if you're in an area of complete devastation, no internet, you will get internet over there. You can communicate with whoever you want, and you can effectively coordinate and attack and fight the Russians.
Right.
So the same thing can happen in India. If there is a riot somewhere, if there are, let's say, terrorists or separatists operating in some part of India, Kuki terrorists in Manipur or some Pakistani infiltrators in Kashmir or whatever, and there's an internet block over there, it's a forested region or whatever, no internet, but they can still access Starlink if they have it. So it's a problem for India. It undermines India's national sovereignty. It can pose a very grave national security threat to India in situations and circumstances where there are disturbances and problems. For example, the Naxalites, you still have some pockets of Naxalites, and they could use Starlink, for example, if they have a receiver. You may even be able to do it without a receiver and so on. But the point is, it's a national security threat. And right now, India, one hears that the Indian government is considering the possibility of perhaps allowing Starlink to operate in India.
Right.
And maybe the pressure is being put in a variety of ways, including through the Canadian thing as well. So there's a lot of things going on over here. It's the Canada thing is just a pressure tactic applied on India by the US is the way I see it, because Canada is owned by the US more or less. Okay, it's not a sovereign country. Neither is the UK, neither is the New Zealand or Australia. And you will see that all these nations, the Anglosphere nations, Five Eyes nations, all of them harbor Khalistani separatists. This Niger and Pannu and all, these are terrorists. Okay, we think of them as Khalistani terrorists. They're not Khalistani terrorists. Niger was a Canadian terrorist. He had Canadian citizenship.
Right.
And this Pannu fellow is an American terrorist. He's not a Khalistani terrorist. There is no real Khalistan movement in India,
The fact that Pannu, I think his name is Gurpawan Singh Pannu or Gurpan Singh Pannu, he gets to broadcast what he's going to do from America.
Yes.
You can't allow the same, by the way, for Islamic terrorists in America. If an Islamic terrorist from any organization starts to broadcast how exactly they're going to inflict terror and make threats to a country like India, the US it's incumbent upon the US to shut it down, and it has. It's so funny that they don't consider non-Islamic terrorism.
Imagine a hypothetical scenario in which there's a terrorist who wants to target the US and who is making similar statements against the US from another country. Will the US allow that? They'll go after the guy and they'll have him extradited, and
they will bypass protocol and jump into the country, kill him, and then come back.
But we can't do that. Right? So that's the duality. That's the double standards that they have. Now, we're not asking that and first of all, there is absolutely no evidence that we have carried out any operations, covert operations or whatever, clandestine operations to target various terrorists that are harbored by these nations. Okay, these are all allegations. It would be nice that if we were to be doing that, but there's no evidence whatsoever. Trudeau has failed to provide evidence.
Is it like the Israeli pager attack, where every Israeli asked, hey, did you guys use the pagers? They're like, well, we don't know. We're not taking responsibility.
Look, I can't comment about that because I don't have any actual information, intelligence. Right. But I would say that without any proof, they can't make such claims.
So then the question comes as to geopolitically, how significant is the idea of Khalistan in destabilizing India?
Very important. It's a very important pressure point and pressure tactic they have. See, let's think about what this Khalistan thing is or was. This entire matter started in the late 70s, early 80s, and we think of the Khalistani movement and the Khalistani terrorism phase in Punjab as something that was done by Pakistan, right? It was all cross-border terrorism. These terrorists were harbored and sheltered in Pakistan, trained in Pakistan, given arms, ammunition, weapons, whatever they needed from Pakistan, then pushed across the border, and then they would unleash terror inside India, mainly in Punjab. Now, that was in the 70s and 80s, right? Mainly the 80s. It went on until the early 90s as well. Mid-90s, let's say. Now, Pakistan, at that point in time, whose side was Pakistan on? It was on the US side.
Correct.
The Americans were also at the same time fighting a guerrilla war in Afghanistan against the USSR. And all of that was being done through Pakistan. So the Americans were at the time financing and funding Pakistani terrorism, not just in Afghanistan. Let's say the Afghanistan thing may be a freedom fight, but in India, it was certainly Pakistani terrorism. And then you had Kashmir as well. The terrorism happened through Pakistan, but it was all funded and financed by the Americans. Because India was not on the US, on the western side during the Cold War. So the Americans, we know, have a known track record of funding and financing Pakistani terrorism in India. The Khalistan issue was created by these various forces. And Khalistan is about creating a hypothetical, fictitious Sikh homeland for the Sikh community, which doesn't include the larger part of Punjab, which is in Pakistan. Lahore was the historical capital. They don't want that. They only want the Indian part of Punjab to be broken off from India. This is a completely artificial, astroturfed movement. There is no real support for it anywhere. Okay, on the ground in India, inside India. The vast majority of Sikhs are nationalistic, patriotic people. Okay, so this is an entirely foreign-driven movement. It was all created and conceived probably in the West, and then the Pakistanis were made to create this on the ground. So now, today, the so-called Khalistan movement exists only outside of India. There's a big hotbed of it in Canada, a significant amount of it in the US. You will see a lot of it in Australia as well, in the UK as well, and maybe a little bit in New Zealand. So it's only the Anglosphere nations, the Five Eyes nations, that are harboring the Khalistani movement. There's nothing of it in India. That tells you something.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
So that tells you something. That gives you a message, right? Yeah. It's an artificial movement created as a pressure point against India to be unleashed whenever you want to apply some pressure on India. And there's much more as well.
My parents were in the UK a few years ago, and they said they wanted to go and pray in a Gurdwara, as many Hindus often do, and vice versa for Sikhs. My mother accidentally looked up, saw a photo of Bhindranwala, the famous guy who's basically the progenitor of Khalistani terrorism, and she saw Khalistan flags inside the Gurdwara. She had no idea that it had been co-opted. They immediately felt the fear and then gradually walked out.
I see.
My question then is, I also, by the way, saw a Khalistani t-shirt in Israel. Just saying, by the way, in Tel Aviv, someone was wearing a Khalistani t-shirt with their Punjab, niche Khalistan likha tha, and an AK-47 on it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. This person was ethnically they looked more northeastern than anything else.
That's a very interesting point you make, because, recently, a few months ago, a video came out on the internet in which you had a bunch of cookie terrorists or separatists or whatever who were in a Gurudwara somewhere in Canada, and they were hosted by the local Khalistani the folks over there, and you can see a convergence happening between the cookie separatists who want to create an artificial Christian nation, cookie land, out of India, Burma and Bangladesh, and the Khalistanis. So all these forces, which can be called breaking India forces, they are coming together. And they are coming together outside of India in various Western nations. And the person you saw in Israel, who bore a very striking northeast appearance.
I tried to run after him to take a picture, because one co-delegationist was like, look, that person's wearing a Khalistan t-shirt. And I got a blurred picture. And if I have it in my phone, I'll try to show it to you. But you can see the AK-47, you can see Punjab, and then some Khalistan.
I see. That's really interesting.
But he was ethnically, you could tell he's from the northeast of the country.
Cookie.
Yeah.
So there's a small or significant. I don't know what the population is, but there are cookies who live in Israel who have been given Israeli citizenship.
Yeah.
They claim to be Jews, but these cookies who live in Manipur and various parts of Burma, etc., they eat pork.
Yeah.
Pork eaters. But apparently they're Jews.
Yeah,
I don't understand how this happens and how this works.
Look, I told it to you off
Maybe
camera.
I do.
I think it's a proper case of donkey. Then you can obviously remake history. So one of the gentlemen we met in Israel was a dude called Rabbi David, or more power to him. But he's written a whole book, the 10th Lost Tribe, Manashem, something like that. That's what he's written to justify that. I actually want to read something from my notes because I want to show to you how Wikipedia is all compromised.
It is.
So Hardeep Singh Nijjar's Wikipedia entry, this is what it says. I'm going to read the starting passage because the ending lines, they could not change. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a Canadian Sikh involved with the Khalistan movement, which calls for an independent Sikh state. Born in India, Nijjar migrated to Canada in the mid-1990s. Sikh organizations viewed Nijjar as a human rights activist, while the Indian government accused him of being a criminal and a terrorist affiliated with the militant Khalistan Tiger Force and sought his arrest. Nijjar and his supporters rejected these allegations, saying he advocated peaceful means for creation of Khalistan. So I read this, I found it very interesting that he's considered a human rights activist by Sikh organizations.
Okay. Do you know that this guy, he was denied Canadian citizenship twice? He entered Canada on a fake name.
He was an illegal immigrant into Canada?
Illegal immigrant, yes. He was denied, I think, asylum twice. But then he was never expelled from Canada. And eventually he acquired citizenship. This is on the record. Okay? The guy enters Canada using forged documents and with a fake name. And he's denied asylum or whatever, visa or whatever it is, twice. But he is never expelled and eventually he becomes a citizen. What on earth are the Canadians doing, I wonder? They want the worst of the worst, the riffraff and the flotsam and jetsam of the world to become their citizens. And then you see what happens. So this guy was a terrorist, okay? I don't know how he became a Canadian citizen. Their government themselves, they have gone on record and said that he was denied visa to Canada twice. So that's the kind of thing that's been going on.
Talk to me, Abhijit, about the New Democratic Party in Canada, which is held by Jagmeet Singh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know really much about them. I've never been interested in these people. They're politically lightweights, but obviously they control a very strong narrative in Canada. And they have been supporting the Trudeau government for quite some time. And now Jagmeet Singh has withdrawn support. So I am no expert when it comes to the local Khalistan movement or the Punjab diaspora, whatever, Indian diaspora in Canada. I know that the Sikhs, the Khalistan movement, not the Sikh overall, but the Khalistan movement is very powerful in Canada and they are very united and they kind of act as the vote bank, which makes them important in electoral considerations, which is why you have parties like Trudeau's party, which had aligned with these guys. So they form an important vote bank. They ensure that a lot of people vote en masse for whoever the current alignment is, and that's how it works. So that's what I can tell you. This guy Jagmeet Singh is a known India hater. He is a Khalistani separatist out and out. And and it's interesting that Trudeau chose to align with such a person.
I think the most interesting angle that has come from this sounds like something right out of Narcos, the show, where Canada is also accused, specifically the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Their Assistant Commissioner, Bridget Govin, has said that India is particularly using organized crime elements to kill our people.
So why don't you provide some evidence? Show some documentary evidence. Shame India, right? If you want to shame India, go ahead.
But they wanted to specifically name Lawrence Bishnoi. The angle is very interesting that you have a jailed gangster who is now in solitary prison controlling killings happening abroad. And his transfer being stayed from Sabarmati jail to Maharashtra, where he can be, questioned by Maharashtra police, is also very interesting. I'm wondering, just as a hunch, do you think Lawrence Bishnoi has become a national asset where the government has figured out if you wanted to actually kill the enemies of India, perhaps using a contract killer is the better way?
Look, I'm not sure about this. Look, if we are really doing something on Canadian soil, let's say we are carrying out covert operations, then the real mastermind would never be known to the Canadians. We would not allow them to know about this. Maybe this is just a smoke and mirror story, and maybe the Canadians are just grasping at straws and concocting stories. I could not comment about this because I don't have any real information about this as to what may or may not be going on actually on the ground. So I don't know. Is he a national asset? Is he not? I don't really know much.
I see. Washington Post has also made some leaks recently. There's a report going viral where they're saying that the Home Minister personally is involved in basically making sure that the Canada receives these terrorists receive the justice they deserve.
Okay.
And Washington Post is leaking shit on Amit Shah. They're leaking stuff on Ajit Doval. And
what have they leaked, by the way?
So they've said that. This is from the leaks. The print reported this. Canadian officials have told the Indian government that conversations and texts among Indian diplomats ordered out of the country yesterday include references to Union Home Minister Amit Shah and a senior official in the research and analysis wing in India who have authorized intelligence gathering missions and attacks on 6 separatists in Canada.
This is not a leak. This is an allegation. It's hearsay. I said, you said, she said, he said. That's it. There's no actual documentary evidence, hard evidence that they're able to put on the ground.
That's true.
Right. Imagine what constitutes hard evidence? A clandestine video recording with audio of 2 guys discussing something which undeniably proves that something happened. No such thing.
Or a document with the signature
exactly
stamps,
a leaked document or a stolen document or something, or a recorded conversation or recorded video or something like that. No such thing has been put forth. It's just allegations that the Washington Post is putting out. This is not a leak. It's an allegation. That's all it is. A claim that is made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence and with contempt.
I see. In all of this, I also, as I was looking through, there were other leaks that the Washington Post did. In 2023, there were the Ukraine leaks, they were called the Discord leaks, in which it was confirmed the US spied on NSA chief Ajit Doval.
Okay.
My question is, why is the US trying to nab down India so hard from an intelligence standpoint? Why are they trying to suddenly infiltrate our country? What, again, I ask you, what leverage, how have we irked these countries that we are being attacked again and again, and we have to be the non-passive India? That is so. Basically, India has been known as a passive country in foreign policy in the way it acts. The Manmohan Singh government looked, I'm not sure it was, but it looked like a very pliable government. So what do we have up our sleeve that's got the whole world riled up against us?
Yeah, let's address that. See, historically, like you very rightly said, India has been a soft power, a punching bag. Okay, people come and punch us and we do nothing. Ahimsa, all that, non-violence and all that. We never respond, we never retaliate. 2008 happened, we did nothing. Okay, we made some statements, our Prime Minister made some statements after 10 days or 7 days or whatever. So historically, we have been a pushover. Now, the past 10 years, things have changed. Okay, slowly, gradually, things are changing. First of all, the economy is on the right path. We are growing 6, 7, 8% per year. And if we continue to do that for the next 20 years, by 2035, 40 horizon, we're going to be the second largest economy or the third largest economy in the world. We're going to be on the path to becoming the next China. That's a big problem for the US. They don't want that to happen. Okay, obviously, it's called the Thucydides trap. They don't want an emerging power to come and challenge them.
It's called what?
The Thucydides trap. It goes back to the Peloponnesian War. That's 2,500 years ago, but that's where it was first written about.
Yeah.
So the US doesn't want that to happen. Right now, India is a very small economy compared to them, and they want it to remain like that.
Sorry, one question. Can you explain what the trap? I know what the Peloponnesian War is, but what is the trap? Like, what is the analogy?
Okay, so there was this Greek historian called Thucydides. He wrote his account of this war, the Peloponnesian War, which lasted several decades, okay, between Sparta and Athens, basically. And he put forth an observation that when you have an existing hegemonic power, a dominant power, and a new power emerges on the horizon that will eventually threaten to displace and replace the existing power, war is inevitable. That's called the Thucydides trap. And it's that term, the Thucydides trap, has been used extensively in the context of the US and China. Okay. Now, when you have India beginning to rise like this, beginning to grow as an economy, we are around $4-5 trillion, whatever it is, 4, I think is 4. But by 2040 or so horizon, we could be a $15 trillion, $20 trillion economy, conceivably, possibly. That's when the Thucydides trap comes into the picture, because now we have a genuine power. India has become a genuine power by that stage. They don't want India to reach there. They would like India to remain a $5-6 trillion economy with a 4%, 5% Hindu rate of growth. Okay, a mediocre nation that can never rise to its true potential. That way, they avert any future conflict and warfare. So it's not something personal that they have against India. They don't hate India. They don't care. It's just business, like they say. So that's the deal. So that's why they want to avert India's growth, India's rise, and hamper and delay India's growth. Reduce it, retard India's growth. That's the whole deal. And for that, they would need a different government in power, not Mr. Modi's government. Mr. Modi is is hell bent on growing India's economy. That's what he's been doing for the past 10 years. And not just that, he has pushed back and hit out at India's enemies, adversaries, whether it is Pakistan, Balakot happened, and surgical strikes happened,
right?
Or whether it is China, not Doklam, but the various border clashes which have been happening with China are because we are now finally building robust infrastructure on the India-Tibet disputed border, and the Chinese are greatly alarmed by that, because we are going to achieve parity with them when it comes to infrastructure in a few years. So that's why the Chinese also have been really, their feathers have been ruffled. So India has been finally taking care of its national interest, promoting and protecting its national interest. And India's economy is growing. India is focusing on Atmanirbharta, manufacturing in India, defense manufacturing in India, all that. So these are the signs and symptoms of a nation that's going to rise in the next 20, 30 years, which can be a problem for the existing hegemon. And that's why they are going after India. And you can see that from a variety of different ways.
The External Affairs Minister is in Pakistan, and that made news. And I was wondering why. Like, it's an unfriendly neighbor. I'm sure हम लोग बहुत countries में जाते रहते हैं. इतनी बड़ी बात क्या है जाना?
It was news because it was the first time an Indian official went to Pakistan, a high-ranking official went to Pakistan after a gap of, I think, 8 years or something.
Okay.
And the welcome he got was reasonably cordial and gracious and all that. So, first of all, from the perspective of the Indian media, historically it's been that India's foreign policy means Pakistan. And the only neighbor that matters is Pakistan. So once again, when a high-ranking Indian official goes to Pakistan, it's big news for them. But Dr. Jaishankar went to Pakistan to attend the SCO summit over there, and it was by all means a successful visit. He met the Pakistani Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and all, and they were all. It was a very cordial kind of welcome that he got, a reasonably warm welcome, which is good. I don't see Pakistan as an important nation for us. I see Pakistan as a temporary nation. No disrespect or offense to the people of Pakistan. I have nothing against them, but it's been a tool of foreign powers to keep on bleeding India. So,
right.
Yeah, but yeah, it's good that he visited the nation, and the summit went off well. So that's
what's the most important period of geopolitical history that fascinates you personally? Like a specific time period, a war, a set of skirmishes that have excited your curiosity?
I think the most important time period I can think of is the current day.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said this many times that the 2020s are going to be the decade of geopolitical change. Massive geopolitical change, realignment, transformation. You haven't seen this much geopolitical change that's already happened in the past 4 years in decades. I mean, not since the First and Second World War have we seen so much turmoil. And complete realignment. You're talking about the emergence of a multipolar world. People talk about the decline of the US. President Trump talks about the decline of the US.
What's a multipolar world where there are many leaders all at once?
See, the Cold War period was a bipolar period. You had two major powers in the world. Nobody else mattered. The US and the USSR. Then you had a unipolar moment after 1991 when the USSR disintegrated. There was only one real power left in the world, the US. Then 2007, 2008 onwards, you had the emergence of China. And people once again started talking about bipolarity, the US and China. Now you have the emergence of Russia. People forget that Russia is still a very powerful nation, way more powerful than China, by the way. Okay? So you have at least a tripolar world, and then you have nations like India, which really matter. France is trying to make a mark for itself in the world. France matters. Iran matters. So you have multiple nations that are acting as geopolitical poles and are all reasonably powerful nations in their own right. Obviously, there's only one superpower even now, the US. Russia is a near superpower with about half the strength of the US, but a far larger nuclear arsenal. Then you have China, which is the economic giant next to the US. And then you have the emergence of India and emergence of re-emergence of nations like France, etc. Even Israel is a very powerful nation in its own neighborhood. So you have multipolarity right now, multiple powerful nations, and that's what we call the emergence of multipolarity. Will this lead to the real emergence of a multipolar world, or will it once again drift back into bipolarity or unipolarity? That time will tell us, but that's what I'm talking about. And so much has changed in the past few years. For example, before 22, nobody took Russia seriously. And now see what's happening. I mean, the Ukraine conflict is happening and Russia has finally pushed back after they took Crimea 2014 also. So we are seeing the re-emergence of Russia as a great power, as a near superpower. And so much else is changing. People talk about de-dollarization. There are other currencies that are coming up. BRICS has become a much larger, already larger block than, let's say, the G20, the G8, G7. So BRICS is emerging, and there is talk of RIC, Russia, India, China, that sort of coalition happening, which I think is very premature. First, we have to resolve our problems with China, and the onus is on China, not on us for that, okay? And China may be sweet-talking us right now. Definitely they are, but we have to be really careful. They have certain objectives in mind, and they still want to keep the border undemarcated. So there's a lot happening in this world right now. The pandemic happened, which completely changed the dynamics and the way we think about the world. You can shut the world down with just a virus, a few grams of a virus worldwide, and you have the emergence of AI as well, which could turn the US into a 1,000-year superpower.
Really?
Oh, see, I'll tell you what. AI, see, any technology that emerges, the real first use of the technology is done by the military and the government of the nation in which the technology emerges. For example, you have stealth bombers and stealth fighters and all. That technology was hidden away for 20, 30 years. Okay, by the US. It was only declared sometime in the late 90s, in the 90s, I believe, just before the invasion of Iraq, the first Gulf War. Similarly, there are technologies right now in existence that no one knows about. Okay, you have all these UFO sightings in the US, only in the US. Why is that so? I think it's Lockheed Martin or Boeing technology that is being cited. Okay, so you have.
What are you saying? You're saying that UFO sightings in USA में होती हैं because it's actually military technology they're testing out.
That is a very plausible explanation.
Okay,
secret technology, which does get leaked out when people see it, but it's always blurry because it travels at such great velocities. Similarly, AI. What's the most powerful AI you can think of right now? Is it Claude? Is it ChatGPT? Whatever it is, right?
Yeah, OpenAI definitely has the most powerful AI right now. It's a set of tools. ChatGPT है उसमें और काफी सारे हैं.
That's what we think. The US military and government, I guarantee you, have an AI that's at least 100 times more powerful than what we have. And when you're talking about an AI that's at least 100 times more powerful than ChatGPT or whatever the best thing is, it's probably AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. It may even be ASI, Artificial Superintelligence. Once you have Artificial Superintelligence, you can achieve breakthroughs that are in the realm of science fiction and fantasy. Okay? So, if the US is able to achieve ASI, Artificial Superintelligence, it's game over for the rest of the world. There'll be a superpower for the next 500 or 1,000 years. That's what could happen. So there's a lot happening in the world right now. This is the geopolitically most interesting era I've ever studied, or forget about living through it. What's happening in real time is incredible. Yeah. You've never had such fast-paced progress and change in the world as what's happening right now. Never before.
I have obviously lived lesser than you have, but for me, I see that now because I have access to devices and I read a lot online, I do see that there are, like when I look at it as a layman, I think per day I see more and more active wars coverage than I saw when I was a kid or a teen. Like you could hear about, like the last time I heard about a massive war was in Syria, right? With Assad, where they were actually killing their people and tons of things were happening. Uske baad I heard a bit about the Yemeni people. And then Russia-Ukraine happens, Israel-Palestine, Gaza, Iran, the whole shebang happens. We were flying over Ethiopia and Abhijit, the other Abhijit told me कि यहाँ war चल रहा है, Eritrea में war चल रहा है, यहाँ war चल रहा है. I'm like, what are you saying? Are we actually in a time where there are the most number of active wars in the world? More than the last 10, 20 years?
Definitely in the last 10, 20 years, yes. I mean, there have been times in the past where there have been wars that no one knew about. Okay? There have been wars that have been suppressed and you did not know about it. For example, the Angola conflict that went on for so many decades. That was a civil war. There have been civil wars all across Africa, coups, regime changes, coup d'etats, civil wars, inter-country wars. There have been wars in South America as well that nobody knows about. A war over a football match also once happened, things like that. So there have been wars that have always been going on, small wars, isolated wars, but nobody really paid attention to those wars. But in today's era, where every little thing is scrutinized, I think we are right now living through a phase of significant tensions in the world. Like you said, there's the Ukraine conflict happening, which is kind of a frozen conflict right now. There is the whole Middle East scenario, Israel, Gaza, and also the Iran angle as well. There's Yemen happening, there's the Houthis happening, there is the situation in Somalia, the pirate situation. There are certain conflicts, like you said, in Eritrea. That's kind of a civil war kind of situation. And if you go further east, you have the Korea situation. There's again hostilities happening between North Korea and South Korea. So overall, it's a very heightened amount of tension that we are seeing in various parts of the world. So yeah, it's like that. But if you ask me, my context is the past 3,000 years. Okay, there have been periods of all kinds of turmoil and whatnot in the world, but it's never been the kind of breakneck pace of change that we are seeing right now. It's never been like that, especially when you have so much high technology that's involved, which is a catalyst for change.
War modifies so fast, and it like day one and day two of a war are very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the Ukraine war, how it started and how it's going now. The technology that you had being deployed on the battlefield on day one of the war, and the technology you have deployed today is tremendously different. You have these loitering munitions and robotic drones and whatnot you have today, which was not there on day one. Yeah. So it's changed in just 2 years. The entire rules of warfare have changed, you know.
I was, of course, in Israel during a time of war recently, and 5 to 10 kilometers away from me, one missile was fired from Lebanon, southern Lebanon, near northern Tel Aviv, where I was roughly located in the same radius. The Iron Dome intercepted the missile, the sirens ran off, and I went out. I didn't go to the safe room, but I just went out after a while, so everyone was chilling. Within 2 days of our departure from the country, Iran throws 200 missiles.
Yes.
And the last few days, some Israelis have also died. Like the war is... But 2 दिन में क्या हो गया, 3 दिन में क्या हो गया, अगर we left 2 days later, maybe we would have just actually seen the missiles coming in.
Yes.
The real question then is, I obviously went on a delegation and I saw Israel and its complexities. I come back and I make a video. Then I see someone getting viral on Twitter, and that's you. And the Israeli ambassador responding to you, so many people are responding to you because you say their website has a map of India that shows Pakistan has taken off a significant chunk of Kashmir, and you correct them. Why is that, number one, an extrapolation into the fact that Israelis actually don't care about India, contrary to popular opinion?
I would not say that the Israeli government doesn't care about India. For most Israeli citizens, I don't think they think about India too much, okay? It is said that the Israeli general population has a very positive outlook towards India. About 70+% of them have a positive feeling about India or something. That's great. But when it comes to nation relations, we have to remember that each nation, it prioritizes its own national interest, and there are no friends in geopolitics. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies. You have temporary alliances, and where you have convergence of interests, nations work together. So in India, our people, our population is extremely emotional, and our people, they love Israel unconditionally. They put Israeli flags on their display profiles and on social media and whatnot. What I was trying to tell the people of India and Israel also is that these relationships are nuanced. These are complex relationships. For example, when it comes to voting in the UN, India often abstains when it comes to votes about Israel and Palestine and all that. We stay out of it. We don't explicitly support Israel.
Right.
We support Israel explicitly when it comes to the issue of terrorism, because terrorism is something we have also suffered, and that is obviously a human rights violation. It's a crime that nobody can forgive. So when it comes to terrorism, we support Israel completely, no doubt about it. But the relationship has its complexities. For example, there is the cookie terrorism issue in India. Like you mentioned, there's a certain population in Israel which is of Kuki origin, and there is some kind of support for the terrorism happening in Manipur coming out of Israel. To some, I'm not saying it's coming from the government level, but certainly from certain citizens in Israel.
Yeah, I've seen some thumbnails which say Mossad, CIA, घुसपैठिए बने हैं Manipur में. I don't know.
So that's people putting out, venting emotional nonsense out there. Okay. There's no evidence for that, for CIA, etc. But there is definitely some support for Kuki land coming from at least the Kuki citizens of Israel, minimum. And maybe more than that, we don't know. Okay? So there is that. Then there is, does Israel truly support India's national integrity? Does Israel truly support India's borders, the official borders? Israel does not. And I'm sure India also, when it comes to the Palestine issue, may not agree with the Israeli maps on the matter. So my point is, it's a complicated relationship. It's not unconditional support both ways. But when you want India's friendship, you should at least reciprocate by showing the full map of India. That's the least they can do, especially on their official websites. Do they lose something? I mean, is Pakistan some kind of nation with they have some kind of alliance or something? Which is an interesting question. I'll tell you why. It's a very complicated matter. Let me explain why. India's historical number one enemy was Pakistan, right? It still is to some extent. Of course, the real enemy, the real threat is China. We know that. But historically, we've always seen Pakistan as our number one enemy, adversary. We grew up thinking that way. Okay? So India, Pakistan, enemies, we know that. Now Israel, now Iran, which is the neighbor of Pakistan, does not have a good relationship with Pakistan. Iran and Pakistan are kind of adversaries. They don't have a good relationship. So, and Pakistan is a US asset. Pakistan was a Chinese vassal for about a decade until the 2022 coup which happened in Pakistan, which no one knows about, in which Imran Khan was ousted and Shehbaz Sharif was put in power.
So Imran Khan's handlers were Chinese?
Yes, he was pro-China. Imran Khan was pro-China, and that was a problem for the US. And then Shehbaz Sharif is brought in, and after that the Pakistani chief of army and whatever military heads, they all go to Washington, and Pakistan is now very much a US vassal state.
Yeah, I actually, from the Washington Post leaks, there is, I have a quote from one of the Pakistan ministers that says the US has access to our internal government documents all the time.
They do. So Pakistan, so let's come back to the geopolitical chessboard. Pakistan is a US asset. Iran, its number one adversary is the US. They call it Shaitan-e-Buzurg, the great Satan.
Shaitan-e-Buzurg.
Shaitan-e-Buzurg.
Oh, the old...
great Satan.
Okay, great.
Okay, that's what the Iranians call the US. And right next door, they have a US asset, Pakistan. So Iran and Pakistan are definitely adversaries and enemies. Now, the biggest supporter of Israel is the US. And the US is with Pakistan. So the question is, which side is Israel actually on?
I guess the US can play with everyone and play with however they please. They can have enemies and friends at the same time.
The US will never play with Israel. You will not see a single instance in recorded history where the US has played with Israel.
I mean, playing as in like playing with their feelings, being friends with someone who actively...
Well, the Democrats have never had a very, very good relationship with the Israelis. We know that Obama and Netanyahu never got along well. But overall, you will never see a single instance in history in which the US has acted in a way that impacts negatively Israel's national interest.
Of course, I didn't mean that. Yeah,
never.
But they will still have someone like a Pakistan as their state.
Yeah, because you need to have assets everywhere. You need to have assets in the subcontinent. Pakistan is a vassal state. Bangladesh is a newly minted vassal state.
Newly
minted vassal state. So the question is, what is the real relationship between Israel and Pakistan? We know that they don't have official diplomatic relations, but we know there is communication, etc. between the two nations. So you see, this is a very complicated matter. The whole place is super complicated. West Asia, the Middle East, whatever you want to call it. Pakistan and Israel also... some point at certain levels may have certain things going on. It's complicated.
Does Iran stand alone in geopolitical skirmishes? Who is Iran backed by?
The Chinese and the Iranians have signed a strategic, long-term strategic agreement. It's a 25-year agreement in which China will invest about roughly $400 billion worth of money into Iran. And the Iranians will give China a tremendous amount of energy, which is oil mainly, at discounted rates.
And intelligence?
Goes without saying. Okay, so there is that. Then you have Russia. The Iranians have been supplying Russia. The Iranians have a very good drone program. They've been supplying Russia with Shahed 2 drones and other drones, which the Russians are using on the battlefield in Ukraine. So Russia has signed an agreement with Iran in which they're going to supply Sukhoi 57s or something to Iran. So Iran is not alone. It has Russia as well as China on its side. And you may have other nations. I mean, Iran has proxies in the West Asia region.
Yeah.
In Syria, Syria is you could say, an ally of Iran. The Houthis are, you could say, proxies of Iran. Hezbollah, Hamas are proxies of Iran.
Does Iran really have that much power to have its own proxies? Because people often talk about in this Israel-Palestine war that Iran has its proxies. But are they really Russian proxies or Chinese proxies or Iranian proxies?
Iran is a geopolitically ambitious nation. Iran has consistently punched above its weight. Iran does have proxies. I mean, imagine what a nation like Iran with its limited resources is able to achieve. They have proxies. They do have proxies. Which are the proxies? Hezbollah in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, etc. Hamas in Gaza, etc. They have proxies within Iraq. Soleimani was killed in Baghdad, by the way. So they have proxies in Iraq. About 50% of Iraq, roughly plus or minus something, is Shia. So they have that. Syria, Assad is an ally of Iran. And so on. The Houthis in Yemen are allies of Iran. So Iran is geopolitically very ambitious, very active. It punches far above its weight. And it may most likely be the 10th nuclear power.
Let me ask you about how important is a country's geopolitical might entirely dependent on the leadership? For example, if tomorrow you remove the Ayatollah, or tomorrow if you remove Netanyahu, can the country still have the same geopolitical might? Like, how embedded is the leadership with the country's geopolitical power?
Right, that's a great question, and that depends on the nature of the country and the nature of its leadership. For some nations, you have elected prime ministers, presidents or whatever, but the real power lies somewhere else. Okay? Maybe certain nations have a deep state. I'm not talking about the US especially over here. Maybe, let's say Israel also may have a deep state, which is the defense establishment, which does the real war making and planning and policy making and all that. And it doesn't really matter who the prime minister is. They will always take care of the national interest and put forth the, do the thing. So if a nation has that sort of extra democratic power center, then it doesn't matter who's the prime minister, president, they will always take care of business. In some nations, the moment the prime minister or president changes, the whole policies change. That is a very dangerous system, because one election can change the entire fate of a nation. And India is one such nation. Okay, India doesn't have a deep state that always takes care of the Indian national interest. Whoever is the prime minister can change things. For example, a certain prime minister comes to power and he exposes all the Indian intelligence assets in Pakistan. It's happened twice before.
What?
Yes.
We've actually exposed our own people.
Morarji Desai.
Why would he do that?
Beats me. But he exposed India's intelligence network in Pakistan. All our assets were intercepted and they were dealt with in the most brutal way you can imagine. That is Morarji Desai, late 70s. He spoke to Ziaul Haq and told what's going on. And secondly, we had Mr. I.K. Gujral, who was in power for three months. He also cut off India's support to its assets within Pakistan.
Tell me something. Has the Modi government really pushed for national security? Were we always like this? Were we always so eager on destroying our enemies outside and making sure we look very strong as a country?
We have never really been the way we are right now. I think the Modi government has been the most hardline when it comes to national security. I am not saying that they are doing enough. Maybe they should do more as well. But I certainly can't criticize the approach and the policies that we have had when it comes to national security. I'm sure we could have done more. For example, the Delhi riots could have been handled better. The Manipur issue could have been handled better. There's a lot of room for improvement. But if I were to objectively and dispassionately compare this government, the Modi government, with previous governments which have been in the past, I think the Modi government has been the best of all the governments we've seen in the past. So I think that's great. And that's why it is important that we continue the same policies going forward the next 2 decades, minimum.
So you've got Mohammad Yunus as the new Bangladeshi Prime Minister. Where is our dear friend, the one who was ousted? Is she still in Delhi? Is she in hiding?
Well, I'm not aware of her whereabouts.
Okay.
I am sure that wherever she is, she's safe and she's being taken care of. She was a very good prime minister for her country. Our Bangladeshi audience will not agree with that. That's okay. That's all right. Mr. Mohammad Yunus is a puppet. Look, he's not democratically elected. The current government that's in power in Bangladesh is an illegitimate government, not elected, not democratically elected. And it's interesting that Mr. Mohammed Yunus has recently went on a tour of the US where he met Mr. Clinton, Mr. Gates, and he was feted and felicitated everywhere. I mean, a guy who's essentially a dictator, who is not democratically elected, who has been placed on top of the government undemocratically, unconstitutionally. The Americans, who always worship democracy and keep tom-tomming democracy, they are feting and felicitating this guy. So clearly something is happening. And this was supposed to be a students' movement, this entire coup that happened. It was not a students' movement, it was a military coup that happened actually.
Right.
She was given an ultimatum, 30 minutes or you're done.
Yeah, we discussed that last
time. By the military, yeah. So this was not really a students' thing. And if it was really a students' revolution, why is the student not the prime minister, foreign minister, defense minister?
Right.
Yeah. So this is a regime change operation that the Americans have carried out successfully. And so we now have East Pakistan that's come back into the picture, and you have West Pakistan on the other flank, and we are kind of sandwiched between these two reasonably hostile nations.
What about Sri Lanka? Is Sri Lanka a country that is currently complicit or is pliant with other superpowers?
Look, when you are a nation of that size, you're always gonna be you can never be fully sovereign. Okay, and I don't remember who came to power in Sri Lanka. I did not really keep track of it, but there were elections recently and the new...
Are they geopolitically insignificant or no?
They're geographically very significant. Okay. Geographical location is very, very strategic, very important. Geopolitically, it's a small nation. What can Sri Lanka do? You are a small nation, small population, small economy. You don't produce much in the kind of volume and scale that makes you geopolitically significant. So overall, it's a nation that needs a protector. It needs benefactors. So the Rajapaksas went in the direction of China, and they were kind of a Chinese vassal at the time. And maybe later it became a US.
Why do we have no vassals? Why does India not have any vassal states?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because we have never ever punched even at our own weight, in our own weight class. We have never, past governments have never thought that India should be a great nation. I remember Dr. Manmohan Singh once explicitly stated that we have no ambitions of being a great nation, of being a great power. We are happy the way we are. We will be a small regional power, and that's it. So our politicians, our leaders historically have never seen us as a future great power. Probably the current leadership does see it that way. And maybe, so that's why most likely we have never had vassals.
Yeah.
Every powerful nation has vassals. The Russians have vassals. The Chinese have a couple of vassals, as we know. They've worked on it. The Americans have vassals all over the place. We have nobody. And that's simply a failure of India's past leaders. The current leader is just trying to deal with the current world the way it's emerging, the stormy seascape that we have.
Yeah, we have some communities across the world, but we don't have any...
We don't leverage that.
Yeah. We don't even... No. I think we do, right? We use our soft culture to our advantage.
There's no such thing as soft power. Soft power is insignificant without hard power.
I mean, like, for example, if Indians living abroad, we often mobilize them or rally them to push India's cause.
Do we? Give me an example. If you can think of one.
Look, I will say, for example, in America, I'm going in conspiracy theory land, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So in America, perhaps we deliberately, make sure that our people are embedded in American society so that we can have positions of power. That's a hunch. But I don't think nothing's significant. I don't think we're doing what the Chinese do, where they will send students to snoop in on America, get embedded in American society, become millionaires, and then feed information back to America. I don't think we do that.
That's the correct comparison. Compare with China. So the Chinese, we know that they weaponize their diaspora. We know that. We haven't done that. So when it comes to the US, you have Indians who are very prosperous. Indians are the most prosperous demographic, non-American demographic after the Jewish diaspora. Okay, we are below the Jews, by the way, Hindus, or Indians. The point is that we are not in positions of power. What is power? Power comes from leverage. Leverage comes from networks of people who will all work towards the same cause. We don't work towards the same cause. It's like trying to herd cats. That's how Indians are, right? So we aren't in positions of power. We have Indians who are very wealthy in the US, all over the place. Most Indians are wealthy. but none of them is powerful. None of them is in a political position of power. You had Nikki Haley, but you can't say that she's Indian anymore.
Yeah.
First of all, she doesn't have the citizenship. She's a US citizen. And secondly, she converted to Christianity. The same with Bobby Jindal. He also converted to Christianity. So if you want to become politically relevant in the US as an Indian, you have to convert to Christianity. Vivek is trying to buck the trend. Let's see how far he goes.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if Vivek is generally pro-India. I think he uses his heritage to his advantage.
Very important point that you have made over here. Yes. I'm not sure if he's pro-India. I think he's pro-US.
Yeah.
Which is okay as a citizen of the US, but then it doesn't help India in any way. It's like all these CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who are of Indian origin, but what difference does it make to us?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah, Sundar Pichai will give a talk about how he needs Indian engineers and they're super good, only to hire them in Google and get them out of the country. Yeah, you're right. I've never thought about this. We've never weaponized our diaspora. We've never thought about, let's act out soft power movements the way even Pakistan does in the UK. The Pakistani people in the UK get into positions of power in universities, radicalize when needed, and have basically become a strong community in the UK.
The Prime Minister of Scotland, was it? Or Ireland? Scotland, I think. He was of Pakistani origin. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is of Pakistani origin. So they rise to positions of genuine political power where they can actually make changes on the ground. We don't. We had Rishi Sunak, but he was an appointed Prime Minister, not an elected Prime Minister.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I wonder if India thinks about doing this because our diaspora is more cultural, they're more emotional, and they often act for their own, let's just say.
They don't unite. They don't work together cohesively as one unit, as one group. It never happens.
Why do you think that is? I mean, could this be that Hinduism is so abstract to hold together?
Yeah, the problem with Hindus is that the question is, what's your identity? Do Hindus think of themselves as Hindus or do they think of themselves as Vaishnava or Shaivite or whatever? I think our sub-national identities take precedence over our national identity or our civilizational identity. As a civilization, we are Hindus. But we have sub-civilizational identities that we hold dearer in our heart as compared to the overall civilizational identity as Hindus or the national identity as Indians. And that is what prevents us from ever uniting. So in the US, you'll have so many different diaspora groups. You will have the Telugu groups, the Telugu speaking people who will all unite together as Telugus. You'll have the Gujjus who come together as Gujjus, Punjabis who come together as Punjabis. But they don't come together as Indians and intermingle except on rare occasions. So that's the problem. That's why we never unite.
Yeah, like I was having a discussion yesterday with Linus only. I was asking him about like how do Christians in Mumbai, live their lives. He had very clear answers. This is the book. This is what we do. When you ask a Hindu, then I started having this discussion with my flatmate last night. I said, like, how will you tell someone else what does your religion stand for? It's like, we're going to probably say something very abstract. We believe in everything. We believe God is inside us. Sure. But then you have these micro-specific things. Like, only now do we know ki Vaishnavites, Shaivites. Also, the reading class knows about it. The average Hindu will not know ki main Vaishnavite hu, Shaivite hu. Right? Then they won't know the Indian philosophy ki jo 20 schools hain. They won't know anything. So you have such a vast system all over, spread out so much. But when someone asks you, can you define your faith? You're just going to say some abstract spiritual stuff. Then gets co-opted and says, wow, Hinduism is so mystical.
And some of it is tangible, like certain practices, the dietary preferences, for example. Some Hindus eat meat. Some Hindus are pure vegetarian. And then they will not like each other. That's also there. But there are so many things. Most Hindus, especially urban Hindus, are not even practicing Hindus. They're Hindus in name only.
Right.
Maybe once a year they'll go to a temple, or Diwali they'll burst crackers, and Holi they'll play, and that's it. That's about it. Some of us have temples in the house, small mandirs and all. But most of us are non-practicing Hindus, so we don't even know what it is. But the identity that we hold on to is the ones that was given by our parents and grandparents and all that. That we are from, let's say, I am from Marwar, I'm from Jodhpur or whatever, and that is our specific identity. Yeah. Or some caste identity they will have. Yeah. We are Baniyas, or we are Kshatriyas, or we are Gujjars, or whatever. Yeah. And so on. So these sub-civilizational, sub-national identities are the ones that take real precedence in our heart, deep in our heart. And that's why we don't unite. And obviously we have so many different lifestyle choices and lifestyle traditions that are so much at odds with each other. So Hinduism is a very, very, very diverse kind of umbrella, civilizational umbrella, in which almost everything goes. There's so much variety and difference that people don't.
Sometimes it actually acts against our interest. Sometimes when it comes to consolidating power, when it comes to like having a strong diaspora that can actually say this is what we stand for and lobby for the Indian cause, even if they do it culturally, I think we really lack that. Sadly.
And there's another thing as well. We don't have leadership. We don't have Hindu leadership, for example. For example, in the Abrahamic religions, they have clear military-style leadership.
Yeah.
Your local church, whoever the main priest is there, is your overall boss, essentially.
Well, in the early years, in the conquest, they had the papal army as well.
They did, yeah. So in a nation like India, if you have, let's say, churches in every city, now you have 30, 40 churches in every major city minimum. And each parish, you have a local head who is the local priest, and I believe they take a tithe, 10% of your income from each person. You're supposed to voluntarily give it up. So that way you have this military style leadership structure, and each local parish head has a boss upstairs, and it goes all the way to the Vatican or wherever it is. So you have a top-down command structure, military style structure in the Abrahamic religions. The same you see in Islam as well. I'm sure. I'm not very familiar with that.
No,
but you have it. When it comes to Hinduism, there are no leaders. There's no leadership in Hinduism. You may have a pujari somewhere, but he's not seen as a leader.
Yeah.
He's seen as a spiritual guy who can, if you are troubled or whatever, if you need some puja done or whatever, you can go to him.
So sadly, he's a practitioner and a service provider.
Sorry about that?
Mostly pujaris or mahants are practitioners and service providers.
Service providers and practitioners, yes.
Yeah.
So when I need to do something vis-a-vis my religion, I'll go to him and he'll get it done for me, and that's it, I'm done. Happy.
Yeah.
Mujhe kuch nahi karna padega. So that's the kind of thing it is. We don't have any real religious leaders, civilizational leaders. Our politicians are all secular, nothing to do with religious leadership.
Yeah.
So we don't have that at all. We are completely adrift. We have no leadership which could bring us together, unite us.
Do you think we need that? Do you think we need religious leaders in our country?
We probably should. See, historically, we have had kings who were the religious leaders, and they would patronize universities, colleges, viharas, vishwavidyas, and temples and all that. And that's how the leadership was structured back in the day. Now we have done away with our monarchies and all that, so we have nothing left. Hinduism is the kind of religion that dies without state patronage, and Hinduism is being starved to death right now. And we are seeing people drifting away. So we probably do need some kind of religious leadership for our culture, civilization to survive.
When the Ram Janmabhoomi, when the Ram temple inauguration happened in Ayodhya, and there was some tiff with the Shankaracharyas and whatnot, I, for the first time, excuse my ignorance, I came to know that Hindu temples have a top authority called the Shankaracharya in the first place. I had no idea. And to me, this seemed like, well, they represent the Hindu temples, they seem to be figureheads only. They don't actually have the kind of power that, say, in a Christian country or an Islamic country where, like a Midtown church in New York can still influence the Catholic vote in New York City for elections, so the mayor has to go. I don't know if it's the same in India to that level.
It's not.
Rather, you instead have godmen like a Gurmeet Ram Rahim will have more political power than, say, like the priest of a major temple.
So that tells you that what is possible,
Yeah.
But it's usually used for political purposes and all. I'm not saying that we should have Hindu leadership that is political in nature. It should be something that enables our civilization to survive and continue and thrive and flourish, that sort of thing. So yes, our religious leaders are non-political. They don't have that much influence on votes or whatever, and they are often at odds with each other also as well. One sees that sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes even mired in corruption. So openly,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah. So historically, the religious leaders of India were always subsidiary to the kings of India, who held the real power. So there was kind of a separation between the religious world and the actual state, which was the military power and the overall power which was held by the kings. And that entire civilizational structure that we had for thousands of years has been destroyed after 47. And that is causing the decline in Hinduism and the decline in the connection that Indians have with their roots. Most Indians, especially in big towns, cities, etc., are kind of getting deracinated. They have no connection with the roots.
Yeah.
Beyond performative celebrations on certain festivals and all that.
Yeah, it's so funny that yesterday two gentlemen had come here. They were like, "Aaj Sharat Purnima," and I could see the deracination in me. I was like, "What is Sharat Purnima?"
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He's like, "But like, I don't know. It's just there's people in Bihar follow more Hindu festivals than say people in Gujarat, or people in like Delhi Kerala follow less than people in Delhi. Like, I'm not sure, but like it's so different." I guess one of my last questions to you then is, where do we go from here? You have possibly this prime minister might not see a fourth term. It's highly unlikely that this might happen. You have a very strong face who leads geopolitical policy for the country and is causing all these rifts and these upsetting many Western powers. If Mr. Modi is replaced, I think which he will be eventually, do you think India's geopolitical might dip, or do you think it might rise?
Yeah, it all depends on whether there is continuity of policy or not. So, Mr. Modi is, what's his age? 73, 74?
Yeah, close to being 75.
Close to being 75. So, this probably will be his last term, assuming he completes the 5 years of this term. He's in a coalition government, so you never know, but I hope it happens. So, the BJP, if they want to stay in power, will have to bring forth a new face. That's clear. Now, who could that face be? One can only speculate. Some people will say it's Dr. Jaishankar. Some people will talk about Mr. Amit Shah. Some people will say it's Yogi Adityanath. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate about that. But they will have to bring out a really compelling face. Somebody who has the same kind of charisma, etc., that Mr. Modi had in 2014, right? And that's what will have to happen. And that person will also need to be capable enough to carry forth the policies that have held India in good state in the past 10 years, and maybe even augment those policies and make them more vigorous. If that does not happen, then probably the BJP will not win in 2029, and then you may have a coalition government, or some other party may come to power, which I can only speculate on. But then you will have a possibly a U-turn in policies, which would be a disaster for India. And the Vishwaguru superpower moment will never happen if the policies don't continue. Because the government has had good policies. It's very important to build the infrastructure in the country, airports, highways, whatever. It's very important to keep on working on the economy. That's the whole basis of the country's greatness, future greatness, if it happens. The military as well. If you stop those policies or change the policies, the country will once again drift towards mediocrity. And that would be a shame, because we have the potential for genuine greatness. Historically, we have been the greatest of all. Right?
Do you think that there could be potentially civil wars as the Prime Minister's term comes to an end? And it's like saying that it's like the world, it's like the Olympics, where everyone's looking at it. It's like an entertainment fest for many, like what we're seeing in the American election. It's happening after 5 years, major regime change. So all of the world's attention is on that. 2029, we're going to have that same moment. So do you think that we could have major uprisings, considering the state of the world right now? It seems to me that the world is eager to be at war. The people are now okay with pressing the trigger, something that they were reluctant about, say, 10 years ago.
Look, if the Indian government has its way, there will be no civil war. But let's think about it hypothetically, theoretically. What causes a civil war? What causes a civil war generally in a nation is when you have two population groups or more that are completely at odds with each other and have very different envisioned futures for the country. And these simply don't match. Okay? Do we have that situation in India? We know that in 2014, you had at least 50 million Bangladeshis in India, illegal infiltrators. That's 10 years ago. Today, it may be 80, 100 million. Okay, we have not really done much about that problem. So imagine 100 million foreigners who don't like you or love you or have no allegiance to the country who are living within. That could be a dangerous flashpoint. You also have the Rohingyas who have been settled all over the place, right? There is that. So there is definitely a certain amount of ingredients in the country that could lead to a potential civil war. And we also have indications that these foreigners who are living in India may be controlled by forces from outside the country. And we know that they have tried certain pilot projects in India, like the Delhi riots and all, where they could unleash things on demand. So hypothetically, theoretically, foreign powers could unleash something like that on demand in the future, maybe in 29, maybe at some other point in time. It is possible. It is certainly possible. So what does India need to do? The government needs to ensure that these people are deported. And you have the cookie land problem as well, who are also foreigners. The foreigners need to be deported. India is for Indians only. But will that happen? Can you deport 100 million people? Is it logistically possible?
No.
No, it's not. So we are in deep water. We're in deep trouble right now. So then what you do is you augment your police forces, keep them on permanent alert, and so on. That's the kind of nation we will have to live in for a while. A while means a few decades, I'd say.
Do you anticipate any border skirmishes with Pakistan that could lead to a major war or no? Is
No,
Pakistan weakened now?
Pakistan can't deal with India anymore. I don't think you may have some minor.
And you would say something different 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
India was a pushover 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Pushover. You could not deal with Pakistan. They did 2008. We did nothing in return. They could keep on bleeding us at a certain rate on and on, day after day. We did nothing. This is not that India. India has gone way beyond that. Pakistan cannot afford to do anything significant with India. You may have, unfortunately, I hope it never happens, but some terrorist activity here and there keeps on happening in Kashmir or wherever. So that may happen at a certain small rate. But I don't see any significant problems with Pakistan. If there is a problem, we can deal with it militarily, no question about it. The real problem is China. The real problem going forward is going to be China. China is making good, sweet-talking India right now, but they haven't done anything to resolve the India-Tibet border issue. The border remains undemarcated because of them. And there is still aggressive patrolling happening here and there, one hears. And one hears of a spy balloon that crossed over into India from Tibet, and we had to down it. We had to take it down. So the Chinese are still up to their old tricks, and the real problem is there. China is the real problem. Pakistan, we can handle.
Yeah, because in the news, we've been ignoring China. It's not on our radar for the last few months.
Yes.
We've been involved in Manipur. We've been busy with Pakistan. We've been busy supporting wars that are happening thousands of kilometers away. We're now dealing with Canada. We haven't seen too much coverage about India-China relations at all for the last few months, which I find a bit odd because you're saying that China is the real threat.
China is the real threat. It is a nation that's way more powerful than India, much larger economy. Military strength must be like 3 to 4 times that of India. And naval strength is immense. Of course, their naval strength needs to be stationed in the South China Sea and in the Eastern Pacific region, or the Western Pacific region, because of the threats they face there. That's why it's good for us. And about a quarter of their military strength can be deployed, their land strength can be deployed in the Tibet arena. But China is the real threat, the immediate threat for us. We share a long undemarcated border with them. And of late, one hears news in the Indian media that there seems to be some kind of rapprochement between India and China. The Chinese embassy, the Chinese official statements, the global times are all saying nice things about India suddenly the past few months. So they're trying to sweet talk India because they have been essentially cut off from the global Western market. The Americans are imposing all kinds of trade barriers against China. They need a market in which to export their manufactured stuff, and it looks like India is the only large market left for them. So they need that. But they will not do it at the cost of the border uncertainty that they've created. They want to permanently keep India off balance by keeping this border undemarcated. And whenever they feel like they can always do some border incursion and apply pressure on India. So India needs to be very careful about China. We cannot allow them to sweet talk us into believing that things are going to be fine with them. We have to see demonstrable action, not just words from China. And the situation on the border is still 70% maybe better, but 30% is still tense, according to the foreign ministry's own statements. So I think the long-term threat for us, immediate threat is China. People talk about RIC happening, Russia, India, China, that sort of coalition happening. That is a long way away. So we have to be practical, pragmatic, and understand what the real threats are. The threats are the border. And the Chinese army still is deployed there. They have Air Force significantly deployed, Chigatse, Lhasa, everywhere. So it's the biggest threat for India, China.
Last question, and let's indulge in some conspiracy because it seems to be, this is what's on everyone's mind. The American election is approaching. They see Trump as a non-deep state actor, but they're convinced that Kamala Harris is 100% deep state. And when I say they, I mean many Twitter accounts whose ideologies I tend to share. When I see that she has no words of her own, she can't speak anything beyond a script, she fumbles. She's worse than Joe Biden in the way she speaks. At least Joe Biden, in his mumbling way, made some sense. And I'm saying that relatively. So, is a deep state completely behind putting Kamala Harris in power? Is that why Trump is not going to win this election?
So I have been of the opinion that it's going to be very hard for Trump to win. I still think most likely Kamala Harris will become the next president of the US. Kamala Harris is an empty suit. She's the face. That's all she is. Her job is to divert the world's attention away from where the real power resides in the US. Okay? And she's going to be good at that. She's going to make all kinds of gaffes and all kinds of silly statements and whatnot and histrionics or whatever. And the media is going to keep focusing on that.
Yeah.
So most likely
she's going to be the fall guy.
You could say, the scapegoat, the fall guy, whatever. But it's also possible that Trump could win if he has kissed the ring, so to say. So if he has made a behind-the-scenes agreement deal with the US
and why this speculation? Because he's famously not friends with this establishment that runs everything.
His last election, the victory, 2016, was all about draining the swamp. The swamp is the deep state, the Washington establishment that is unelected and it never goes out of power. He said, I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to change the whole system. Well, boo-hoo, it didn't happen. So maybe this time he may be smarter. Obviously, he's a very smart man. He did not become so rich by being stupid. So it's possible that he may have kissed the ring behind the curtains. And now that Elon Musk is with him, Robert Kennedy is with him, Tulsi Gabbard is with him, Vivek is with him, maybe there's a deal that he once again becomes the next president and then nothing changes.
Also, it's very cool to have a bunch of Avengers with you. Like, imagine Elon Musk, Trump. That's like the world will pay for that fantasy to come true.
Very entertaining, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very entertaining times to see the CEO of 3 companies tweeting fun and being at his rallies. It's an exciting time where superstar entrepreneurs couple with other superstar entrepreneurs who are now former presidents. What's funny to me is that the assassination attempt has been forgotten.
Yeah, well, the first assassination attempt was no joke.
Yeah.
He was nearly taken out. Okay?
The media cycle has gone past it.
Yeah, it's gone past it. Apparently, there have been 2 more attempts.
Yes.
But yes, they seem to have moved on from it, which is kind of curious. I mean, the first attempt, you can't fake that. You simply can't fake it no matter how good of a shooter you are. Because there's a gap between the pulling of a trigger and the movement of his head.
Right.
And you can't predict what he's going to do with his head after you pull the trigger. So that was no joke. There was a real attempt. He was very lucky to survive. But the media cycle has somehow moved past that. That was a very serious thing. Yeah. It could have changed the history of the world, that attempt.
Yeah. So weirdly enough, he's mentioned it a few times, but no more. But मैं तो ये सोचता हूँ मैंने जब ये हुआ था, I predicted that people are going to remember this for 2 days and then forget exactly what happened.
Well, yeah, that's the way the media cycle works these days. Yeah. Even he hasn't mentioned it too much.
Yeah.
Maybe once or twice in the Flagrant podcast or something he mentioned that. And then he has moved on too. Maybe he has kissed the ring somewhere. Maybe.
We'll find out
we will.
In the next episode of What the Hell is Happening in the World with Abhijit Chavda. But as always, it was a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for discussing many of the things you did. And people can follow your work on Abhijit Chavda on YouTube, Twitter. We'll see you on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye. Sayonara. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you so much.
Awesome.